How can we make a new file in SwiftUI? So today what we need to do is create the settings page file. And for that, I'm going to right click any of my files and go to new file. And after that, I'm going to be choosing a SwiftUI view because I want this file to have the preview and the view components. And I'm going to be naming it settings page. After that, I'll click done. And as you can see, our file has been created. Now we made a sheet last time and I want this sheet to show the contents of this new file. And so I'll just put its name there. And then as you can see, we get that hello world because that's all we have in the file right now, but we're going to be really changing that up over the next couple of reels. Happy coding! It's really important to make sure you know what settings your user is going to be needing to change in your app. And so what I'm going to do is just outline what I think is most necessary in a VStack. And for me, that's changing the central value, the background color, having it reset automatically or not, and having all the help and contact us style information. And this just gives me a rough guideline of what I'm going to be needing to code before I move forward. And to actually implement my code, I'm going to be using extensions, and we covered this in a different reel, but it's basically just using private variables to keep all of our code organized. And for now, I'm just going to be adding a dummy value of a text just so that my code compiles, but we're going to be editing this a lot further moving forward. Happy coding! The settings page that I'm needing for my app is going to need to take in a parameter, and this is going to be used to get the current value of whatever page the user is on, since it's a tracker app, and it's going to allow me to display the correct settings. So after taking in that parameter, every time I call an instance of my settings page, I'm going to be needing to supply that parameter. And so in my home screen view, which is the main view for my app, I can do that through my view model and my tab index. But I'm also going to need some dummy data for the preview of the settings page inside the settings page view, because otherwise it's not going to compile and I'm not going to be able to see how my final result is going to look. And so after I add all of that in, my code will compile and I can move forward. Happy coding! Welcome back, guys, to building a tracker app on Reels/Shorts. And today what we're going to do is start building the UI components for our settings page. And so what I mean by this is that we're not going to be diving into the logic components just yet because we're going to be implementing them later in our view model. Right now, we're just trying to put our UI together. And so the first thing I'm going to do is for my change central value, I'm going to be using a button with a label that has an H stack with two texts, one for the change value, and then one that just displays the current value, and I have a spacer between them to put them on opposite sides of the screen. And in the preview, you can see how we have that right now. And it does look kind of off right now, just alone in the center of the screen, but when we add more components, it'll look more put together. Happy coding! I'm making a settings page that adapts to each tab in my app, and I forgot that the user probably wants to change the name of the screen they're on in the settings page. And so to add that in, it's going to be super similar to how it was for the change value, and it's just a button with a H stack as a label with the change name and then the current name shown. And as you can see in the preview, it's right there below what we did last time. And one thing is that I'm going to be adding a spacing of 20 to this VStack so that everything we add is a bit more spaced out. Happy coding! If you want to let your user select a background color for your app in a super cool way, well then you're in the right place. Today we're going to be working on the code for this, and pasting it in, I know it looks really complicated, but it's actually super simple. All it is a VStack with a text component that says background color, and then an H stack with a for each loop. And this for each loop is looping on a custom enum that I made called background color. And for each case in the enum, it's making a circle. And the first two modifiers are just formatting the circle. But then after that, the scale effect and the dot on tap gesture makes it so that if the user taps on a specific color, the background color will change to match that color. And the dot scale effect will use a tertiary operator to make that circle a little bit larger. And so we can see how this looks on the preview when green is selected. And of course, since we haven't done the logic components, we can't really use it yet, but don't worry if this is complicated because the next reel is completely dedicated to explaining how this works. Happy coding! Hey guys, in the last reel I introduced a super cool way to select the background color for our app, and today I'm just going to explain it a bit further. So the main complex part of this is the for each loop, and the fact that it's looping on background color, which is an enum. So let me just take a moment to show you that enum in case you forgot it. And as you can see, it just is really simple. It has one case for each background color, and it also conforms to case iterable and equatable. So we're making it conform to case iterable to allow us to loop over it in the for each loop, and in this case we're making a circle for each case. And the equatable part basically means that if we have two variables of type background color, if they have the same case value, then we can equate them to being true. And that's going to allow us in our dot on tap gesture to see if the current background color is the same as the one that the user is tapping on. And the dot scale effect is just just a tertiary operator that's really simple to check if the current background color is the same as the circle. It'll just scale it up a little bit. And I hope that kind of clarifies everything we've been doing. I'm also going to be adding a padding on our VStack just so we can see everything more clearly. And that is all we're doing in this code. So it's really not that complicated, but feel free to rewatch this reel and the past one if you're still a bit confused. Happy coding! So in order to add a toggle to our settings menu, what I'm going to do is start off by making an @state variable at the top, and this toggle is going to control if the values of our tracker reset automatically at 12 a.m. or not. So I'm just going to name my variable reset value daily, and then I'm going to go down and paste in the code. So this is really simple. It's just a toggle, which is a SwiftUI view, and using that, all I'm doing is binding it to the @state variable that I made, and as a label, I'm just saying that it's for reset value daily. And under that, in smaller text, I'm just adding at 12 a.m. data not saved, because in this first version of the app, none of the data is going to be saved. And that bottom modifier there, all it's doing is just setting the color for the toggle to the same color as the one for the page that the user is on. So as you can see in the preview, right now the color is green, and so the toggle is green. But if it was like red or blue or something else, then that toggle color would be the same. And that's just a little nuanced effect to make everything look more cohesive. Happy coding! If you want some elements of your view to only show when a user clicks a button, this is the perfect way to do it. All you have to do is declare an @state var of type bool and set it to false to begin with. And then all I'm going to do right now is just add in the link section for my settings. So this is going to house things like rate us, contact us, about us, and at the end there you can see this button that says help. And what that has is a show help.toggle, and show help was the name of the @state variable that we declared. And right now all it's doing is just toggling it. But in the next reel, we're going to jump into how we can use this to show our help section only when this value is true. Happy coding! Okay, so as promised, today we're going to go over how we can show a part of our view only when a value is true. And so in the last reel, we made an @state variable of show help, and I want to display the help section only when this variable is true. So I'm just going to add an if statement directly into my VStack, and then I'm going to be adding the help section inside. And I can paste in my help section. It's really rudimentary right now. All it has is just some things that I think somebody could get stuck on or need, and I'm going to be customizing it and adding links a lot more later. Also, this is where we're going to add in our privacy policy and our terms of use, which is required by Apple if you want to publish your app to the App Store. So we'll get more into that later, but right now the main part is that the way we've coded this is if we tap that help button that we made last time that just toggles our @state variable, then it'll show or hide this help section. And so this is a very cool way to only display something when it's needed, and otherwise it's just very easy to hide. Happy coding! Welcome back, guys, to Building Entire App on Reels/Shorts. Today is really exciting because we finished the UI components of our settings menu. And so what I'm going to do is go back into my home screen view, which is where we're going to call the settings page from. And I'm just going to add a .presentation dense modifier and a .fraction of 0.60 inside. And all this is going to do is just tell Xcode that I only want 60% of this sheet to pull up when the user clicks the button to show it. And so as you can see, we have enough space to see everything we need, but not too much. And also, just to make it look more like the user is able to slide it down, I'm going to be adding a very thin rounded rectangle on the top of my VStack in the settings page. And so if we go back, this is just a UI thing where it looks more like a sheet now than it was before. Happy coding! If you want to have more control over your tab view, this is the perfect way to do it. So I recently built a settings menu, which is supposed to be different for each tab in my tab view. But if you see on the preview, it kind of gets stuck on one tab and it doesn't change properly. And so this has to do with the way I'm passing in a parameter to my settings page. So to fix this, what I'm going to do is make a new @state variable of selected tab, and I'm going to bind it in the selection parameter of my tab view. And this tells Xcode that I want the index of the item that's being shown to the user to match with the selected tab value that I've just binded. So if I change the selected tab, it'll change the item that's shown. And if I change the item that's shown, it'll change the selected tab. And so the item that's so-called inside of my for each loop is a Z stack with several components. And so I can just add a .tag of tab index, which is the value from the for loop that we've been using so far. And instead of passing in that tab index with my vm.tab model array, I can just pass in the selected tab. And I know this seems pretty confusing, so I'll explain it more in the next reel. Happy coding! What is the .tag feature in tab views for SwiftUI? So in the last video, what I did is I made an @state variable and I binded it to my tab view. And inside of my for each loop, I'm adding a .tag on the item which represents each tab. So for me, that's a Z-stack full of several things. And the .tag value is just assigning a value to each tab. And it's a quick way that we can see which tab the user is currently on. And we're using our tab index to pass in these values. And so like the first tab is going to get a value of 0, the second one 1, etc. And in theory, the tab index and the tag value should be the same, but in a practical sense on the back end, the tab index doesn't really update as frequently or as reliably as the tag value does. And so that's why using the .tag is a reliable way to pass in the correct data to our settings page each time. And also this .tag value is implicit, meaning that if you're just using the basic tags, then even if I don't have this .tag modifier right here, it's still going to be implicit and the code is still going to work. Happy coding!